Hello, friends in the educational leadership group. I am coming live today talking about boundaries and how to set boundaries with your stakeholders. It's funny that yesterday I thought about talking about boundaries for today's live, and we just had a PD session with a anxiety coach for the whole school, talking about ways for us to learn how to manage our anxiety so we can help children manage their anxiety in the classroom. And one of the things she talked about as a self-care technique is making sure that you're setting boundaries and reiterating what those boundaries are. So, not that people overstep their boundaries or anything or don't stay in their lane, but let's be honest, they do, especially when you're in leadership. I often say that just because someone went to a school doesn't mean they know how to run a school, and that often happens with us. A lot of people will second guess us and tell us what they think we should be doing, oftentimes overstepping their boundaries and not staying in their lane. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how to respectfully establish and reiterate and reinforce those boundaries. So the first thing you need to consider is who do you need to speak with? Which stakeholder? Depending on the stakeholder, it will really depend on how you approach it. So who was it and what is the issue? So I'm going to give you an example from when I was an assistant principal. It just came to mind. I had a board member. I'm not going to say what her name was, but she was borderline inappropriate at times with me. And we were at an event, and I was dressed up. It was the event for the school's, what's that called? You know, the organization that supports a school. I can't think of it, but anyway, the foundation. It was the foundation's event, and we were all dressed up, and she made a comment about how I looked and about some stuff that was really not appropriate about her mentioning about my body and things like that. And then I let it go. I just didn't address it. It made me uncomfortable, but I didn't address it. And then a couple of weeks later, she was in my office sitting opposite me from my desk. And again, if you've been following some of these lives, I was young when I became an assistant principal. I was 27, I think. Yeah, 26 or 27. And I believe it was the first year. And she started making comments about how I didn't dress young enough, and I had this beautiful body, and I should be showing it off, and yada, yada, yada. And I can remember thinking to myself, this is crazy. Like, why would this woman be talking to me like this? And clearly she was stepping over a boundary. And having been new and not really knowing how to address it, I ended the conversation with her quickly, and I actually made an appointment with the superintendent of schools. And his name was Roger, and I said to him, Roger, the board, you report to the board, and this woman did X, Y, and Z, and this is how I'm feeling, and she completely overstepped her bounds. And he wound up addressing it with the board chair. So had I known then what I know now, I would have been able to address it more first myself, which I wasn't comfortable doing. So whenever someone oversteps a boundary, the first thing you have to do is you really need to check in with yourself and say, like, how am I feeling? Because sometimes when people overstep a boundary, it can make you angry or make you think, like, who on earth do they think they are? Or who do they think they're talking to? Or, along those lines. And that's a very normal response. But the first thing is to check in with yourself, because if you're angry or you're upset or hurt, that is not the time to talk about boundaries. And I talked about that when I talked about dealing with difficult people. I personally know that if I am going to address something like that, I need to wait until I've processed it, because that one part of my brain, that reptilian brain, will strike, and it will not be a good conversation. Now, occasionally in my career, as some of you also, I have handled it not the right way. Oftentimes it's me trying to handle it the right way, and then eventually I've had enough. And that's a learning piece for me to say, at some point you have to stop the conversation and just say, this is the way that it is. So the first thing you want to do is you want to check in with yourself. The second thing you want to do is frame the conversation. And the way you frame the conversation is you find out what is the issue and then talk about your expectations. So see if I can come up with a good example. I'm just going to make something up. So let's say that we were in a staff meeting and I talked to the whole building about a change we're making in our curriculum, and somebody stood up and said, "That's great. I want you to know, though, that I'm piloting something in my own classroom for ELA, and I'm going to continue doing that because I'm collecting data for my master's program," or whatever it may be. Well, clearly, that person overstepped their bounds by choosing what curriculum he or she was going to be using in the classroom. So at that time, likely at the meeting, I wouldn't call that person out and say, "Well, that's interesting. I'd like to learn more about that, about your master's program and what you are studying, but we are going to use this curriculum that we have committed to." After that, I would ask that person to come into my office, and I would frame the conversation. And I would start by saying, "Hey, listen," I'm going to use the name Angela. "Hey, listen, Angela, I wanted to talk to you about the comment that you made at the staff meeting. Can you tell me a little bit about why you thought that was an appropriate time to address that? And I need to know a little bit more about you deviating from the curriculum in your classroom." So you want to set it up so that this person has to explain to you what they did or why they were doing it. And then after that, you're going to set up your expectation. And it would go something like this. "Angela, while I understand that getting your master's is very important to you and you want to pilot this curriculum, that is not a decision that you can make on your own. We are a school where we follow X, Y, or Z curriculum, and there's a reason for that. We have chosen that curriculum, we have vetted that curriculum, we are keeping data on that curriculum to make sure the curriculum is meeting our needs, and we can't have one classroom deviate with another curriculum that hasn't been vetted by the instructional leadership staff. So before you go any further, you need to stop using that curriculum and go back to the curriculum that we're using as an organization." Then after you set your expectation, you're going to wrap it up. I mean, this really is not a conversation here. This is basically, I'm telling you that what you're going to do. Now, if that person gives pushback, then, the conversation is going to go in a different way. It's going to go probably back to that dealing with difficult people. But likely what will happen in a situation like this is the person will say to you, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it. I thought I had a little bit of latitude with what I could do in my classroom." And then you're going to respond, "Sure, absolutely. You have latitude with how you teach or certain aspects, but you do not have latitude with the curriculum that you use, however you're going to address that." So then you're going to wrap it up and you're going to make your closure, bring it to closure and say, "I'm really glad we had this meeting. I hope you understand now, you have a better understanding of why classrooms can't deviate from the planned curriculum that we have by, committee or whatever it may be. And if you have any questions about any curriculum, please ask X, whoever, Mrs. X, Mr. Doctor, whatever." When it's a staff member, you're going to follow up with an email. Remember back to the previous video. So, "Dear Angela, I was so happy to hear, that you came to see me today. Was excited to hear about your master's program. As a follow-up, this is a reminder, you may not deviate from the curriculum that the school has adopted. If there's any way I can help you in your master's program moving forward, please don't hesitate to ask." And that's it, right? That's that. Now, there are other types of situations where people overstep their boundaries. And I want to tell you about a parent meeting that I had where the parent, we were in a class, parent came in unannounced and wanted to meet with the dean of students. And the dean of students said, "Donna Marie, can you come to this meeting because she's very angry," and whatever it may be. So I came to the meeting, and first of all, she was, "Hey, Desmond, thanks for checking in." She was very angry, and she was, inappropriate, and I dealt with her. And at one point, I had addressed something. She had a concern, I had addressed it. She kept coming back to it like three times. And I actually put my hand up and I said, "Stop. I've addressed that with you already, and this is the third time you're bringing it up. I understand that you're upset about something that happened in the past. I've addressed it. We can't go backwards. Let's just move forward and plan what we're going to do for your child moving forward. So she was trying to take the conversation elsewhere. So she had questions about what was going on in the classroom. Obviously, I could not address it because I was not in her classroom. So I asked the teacher to come down, and the teacher was in the meeting. And at one point, she was very frustrated with the teacher, and she was like, she can just leave, I'm done with her. And I said, excuse me, actually, no, she cannot leave because you have asked questions that I don't have the answer to. And this teacher is here to answer your questions. So if you want to have your questions answered, she needs to stay and, address it that way. Whereas the parent thought that she could just dismiss my teacher. I'm done with you. We wound up bringing the meeting to really good closure. She was happy when she left. She was not as frustrated, but I could not allow her to keep trying to derail that meeting. The most important thing, though, when establishing boundaries with parents is to make sure you're doing so professionally. You can never say, remember when you were a kid and your mom said, because I'm the mother, that's why. You can never say, because I'm the principal, that's why. I'm the assistant principal, I'm the superintendent, that's why. That's not a reason, right? You have to give them a reason that speaks to them and is valuable to them. Okay, so if ever when you're setting up boundaries and conversations, it goes sideways, then go back to how to have difficult conversations, right? Empathy and all of those things, strategies, and coming up with suggestions. But boundaries are so important because, we are in an ever-changing field in terms of what's going on right now with COVID, and people really do need to stay in their lane. You can't have people doing things outside of what their area of expertise is or out of their area of influence, because it can impact the entire organization. So back to establishing boundaries. The first thing is, first of all, you have to determine who do you need to reinforce boundaries with. Which stakeholder is it? Because you might address it differently. If the person who broke a boundary was your supervisor, then you're going to approach that a little bit differently. The second question is, what's the issue? So you need to make sure you know what the issue is so that you're establishing the correct boundary. I'm at work and it's late. It's 5:15 and everyone should be gone. So there's someone driving through the parking lot I didn't notice, so checking it out. And then as you bring that person in for a conversation, first check in with yourself. Are you going to be in a good headspace right now to have this conversation? Are you angry? Are you frustrated? Don't have the conversation. Wait until you're calm. Second, once they're in there, you're going to frame the conversation. What is the issue? What are your expectations? What is the expected outcome? The third thing you're going to do is you're going to wrap up that meeting. It's not going to be a long meeting. It's basically, here's my expectation. And the last thing is follow up. So you're going to follow it up with an email. With a parent, you might follow it up with a phone call and then just log it in your communication log, but always a follow-up. Okay, so this is boundaries. Tomorrow's Saturday, so tomorrow is going to be about self-care and talking a little bit about the importance for self-care for educational leaders, because we give to everybody, and sometimes we have to give back to ourselves. So I wish you a wonderful Friday evening with your family. I don't know what time I'll pop on tomorrow because it's an off day, and I'll probably have a top knot on, have my hair in a top knot and no makeup. So going to be coming at you tomorrow, totally real. Have a great day. Keep doing the work because it's hard work, and we need people like you who are committed and have the fire in the belly. Have a great weekend. I'll see you tomorrow.